Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to another PalaView Market Research video. Today, we are going to do a deep dive into one of the most underappreciated topics in all of politics and economics. And that has to do with this topic regarding how we measure economies in the 21st century. Because there is one institution that sits at the heart of every single economic and social problem that affects every single country in the world. Every single one of you have already heard about it, and you likely hear it mentioned on a weekly or monthly basis. The institution is highly unique because it possesses no people. It is actually an unbelievably simple formula that we use to measure and therefore define the success of nations. This institution is called Gross Domestic Product, or GDP. You probably view this as some harmless formula that we use to measure the economic production of nations. But what you fail to see is that within the context of a capitalist system, we are only able to value that which we measure in economic terms. What we fail to measure with macroeconomic measures like GDP, we inevitably fail to value in our society. This problem, which I'm going to be breaking down in this video, is extremely solvable, and I promise you, it is a much bigger and more profound problem than you can imagine it to be. So stay patient with me as I walk you through the history of GDP, why it is so toxic to individuals living in the 21st century, and at the end of the video, I'm going to walk you through real solutions to these problems, okay? So GDP is the primary method we use to define and measure economic progress globally. GDP is measured by the summation of consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. The economist Simon Kuznets, pictured here, introduced the concept of national income in 1937 in a presentation to Congress. Kuznets believed that GDP easily and accurately described all economic production by individuals, companies, and the government in one single measure. And back in the 1930s and 40s, GDP was appealing to the US as it favored our interests at the time. It was easy to calculate and favored manufacturing economies and oil production. However, the 1940s hosted wildly different social, technological, and economic conditions than today. The American economy was driven by manufacturing and oil, while data compiling systems were slow and cumbersome. This was advantageous for the United States as it was exiting World War II as the world's primary hegemon. And then through the creation of non-governmental organizations such as the World Bank and United Nations, GDP was installed as the primary measure used for comparing countries to one another. However, Kuznets himself concluded his proposal to Congress highlighting its shortcomings and that the welfare of a nation cannot be inferred by this metric. Yet, for the past 80 years, GDP has been revered by American leadership as if it does comprehensively integrate the health and well-being of a country's citizenry, as well as possessing the capacity to evolve with economies. In an incredibly important speech by Robert F. Kennedy, he covered these points very succinctly.
Too much and for too long, we seem to have surrendered personal excellence and community value in the mere accumulation of material things. Our gross national product now is over $800 billion a year. But that gross national product, if we judge the United States of America by that gross national product counts air pollution and cigarette advertising and ambulances to clear our highways of carnage. It counts special locks for our doors and the jails for the people who break them. It counts the destruction of the redwoods and the loss of our natural wonder in chaotic sprawl. It counts napalm, and it counts nuclear warheads and armored cars for the police to fight the riots in our cities. It counts Whitman's rifle and Speck's knife, and the television programs which glorify violence in order to sell toys to our children. Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry, or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, Neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And it can tell us everything about America, except why we are proud that we are Americans.
It is important to reemphasize here that economic growth is a competition, and GDP is how we keep score on the global stage. Growth, power, and what is and is not considered valuable to a society is all being influenced by GDP. GDP can therefore be more accurately understood as a government institution that determines what industries are incentivized, subsidized, and encouraged in global markets. If an industry does not improve GDP, it is not in the world's interest because markets perform to serve GDP. However, GDP no longer serves markets. When lending to developing nations, the World Bank and the IMF, International Monetary Fund, integrate conditions into the loans that force the accepting countries, the countries receiving the loans, to meet certain conditions, namely GDP growth measured in terms of a year-over-year percentage. However, countries need these loans to invest in crucial aspects of their society, like infrastructure, education, and health. But these investments into hospitals, schools, and roads, etc., are slow to realize themselves in GDP terms, and therefore lead to extensive defaults. These organizations default countries on loans even after they successfully invest in these essential aspects of society. Argentina, for example, was forced to insure their central bank with US dollars. On top of that, these international banking organizations or cartels, many of which I've actually presented to personally, by the way, force austerity measures into these countries, meaning they are forced to adopt American social and economic policies. Guys, the reality is the only countries that do not default on these loans are countries with large populations like India, where they can exploit cheap labor for manufacturing, right? Or countries like Nigeria, where they have untapped oil or natural gas resources, because those areas of the economy manifest themselves faster in GDP terms, not because they are more valuable than technology or financial service-based economies. The world has become a significantly different place since the United States was a manufacturing-based economy. In fact, today the US is one of the primary victims of GDP's cancerous influence. In the 1970s, the American economy shifted into a financial services economy, and in the 2010s it transitioned again into an economy driven by cyber technologies. Since the 1970s, the American economic environment has failed to grow as sustainably as it could have, as indicators like median male income have plateaued, and in parallel, economic inequality has rapidly increased. Economic measurements today fail to appreciate how distinct our economy truly is. Upgrading GDP to more comprehensively support a 21st century economy will allow the United States to more efficiently and effectively grow, while destabilizing countries like China that fail to offer the requisite civil rights and liberties that facilitate the creative economic environments that we have here in the West. The rise of China as a threat to American power exists solely through a GDP perspective, as it is manufacturing based and is wildly less dynamic. So if we upgrade how we measure and define the success of nations in macroeconomic terms, we can literally handicap the Chinese economy overnight. If it isn't valued in economic terms, it is therefore not valued. This is something I really need you guys to understand. In a market-based socioeconomic system like the one we live in today in America, where markets and money drive democratic process, not the other way around, all dimensions of a society that fail to be valued in economic terms will not be valued effectively in the marketplace, and therefore not valued at all. If carbon footprints, water quality, human health, infrastructure investment are not measured within this context, markets are incapable of prioritizing them. And this is all so insane because we live in this age of big data where we can efficiently measure qualitative aspects of our society in quantitative terms. Think about it this way. We are currently running the economy on an economic framework that was created 30 years before the personal computer. Fortunately, however, today there exist numerous statistical indexes that are ready to be integrated into economic models like GDP that measure and therefore economically incentivize the health and prosperity of a country's citizenry. And the goal here isn't to actually abandon GDP. The goal is to build on top of it. Because economics is a bridge between psychology and mathematics. What is valuable at the macroeconomic level and the individual or societal level have become completely disconnected from each other. In order to create a healthy socioeconomic environment where human values and economic production walk in unison, GDP must adopt supplementary measures that integrate social progress, health, and the environment. And only then will markets orient themselves to acknowledge the nuanced psychological needs of modern society. Our collective cognitive dissonance has become so profound that nearly all American millionaires have huge allocations of their portfolios in indexes like the S&P 500, making them individual shareholders in companies that nearly all of them are fundamentally against, such as McDonald's, Pfizer, Lockheed Martin, Moderna, Raytheon. I could go on. And this means that nearly every single wealthy American is a literal shareholder in the military industrial complex, big pharma, the processed food industry, and fast food industries, and predatory financial institutions like BlackRock. Maybe some people are okay with like one or two of those industries, but literally fucking no one endorses all of them. But yet, everyone is so dumb that a 28-year-old kid living on the beach has to keep pointing this out to them, okay? So let's walk through some of these early solutions. Simon and Holt, Michael Green, Michael E. Porter, and Judith Rodin have all contributed to the creation of statistical indexes that measure these important aspects of a country. So here are some examples of their efforts, all right? The Good Country Index is simple. It's simple to measure what each country on Earth contributes to the common good of humanity and what it takes away relative to its size, okay? It uses data from the United Nations, World Bank, and other international organizations to measure various dimensions of what a country objectively, what makes a country objectively good to the world, right? Statistics that measure food aid, refugees hosted, open trade, and development assistance together illustrate how countries compare in designating resources to improve the quality of life for those outside of their own borders. By recognizing these contributions within an economic context, a high contributing country can be enabled to take on more contributive risk and therefore more effectively scale humanitarian efforts. The Social Progress Index is broken down into three primary categories: basic human needs, foundations of well-being, and opportunity. What a government provides to a general population, like water quality, life expectancy, personal liberties, things like that, range on a vast continuum when you compare country to country, right? Creating economic incentives for countries that proportionally serve the needs of their people at a higher quality than others must be encouraged to continue to improve. To create a world where markets compete over who has the longest life expectancy, lowest carbon footprint, lowest homeless population, most educated citizenry, and not just raw economic production, we need to look to guys like the Good Country Index and the Social Progress Index, and you can watch all their TED Talks. They're awesome, and go to visit their websites to see how this actually works, right? Because we need to help the United States upgrade the global economic game so that the financial incentives expand past production and consumption. A market is a game, and games are characterized by their rules. The limitations of our market-based systems don't lie in their inherent potential. They lie in the rules that govern them. When so many of these metrics can now be accurately measured, it is our responsibility to adjust our governing principles accordingly. By empowering money to function more closely to a utility, we can spark the creation of a greater system, a system more in tune with the needs that all human beings share. In order to effectively and efficiently address the problems the United States and the rest of the West face, politicians have a duty to recalibrate their focus on the following: adopt a new supplemental measure of economic progress to drive domestic, foreign, and economic policies. If you made it this far, thank you. If this message resonates with you, please subscribe and share this video with others. I'm here to directly solve these problems, not to just whine about them like everyone else, I guess. So peace and victory. Peace and victory. See you guys tomorrow.